My name's Katie. I'm a professional singer, singing teacher, and also a mother to 2-week-old Zachary, which is a full-time job in itself and quite tiring.
So my name's Alicia. I'm a pianist and I'm co-founder of the Oizys Ensemble.
My name is Marcus Robert Feld. I'm a composer and I also co-founded the Oizys Ensemble.
I studied at Trinity Laban Conservatoire Music and Dance for 3 years on the Postgraduate Artist Diploma course, and I'm freelancing in London as a pianist and piano teacher. The Oizys Ensemble was co-founded by myself, Marcus Feld and Katie Gilbert. We all met at a networking event for musicians.
Being a composer, I wanted to get my music out there and have musicians play it, and I always have a love for chamber music.
And after Marcus sent me some of his music and we sort of connected, I was looking for someone to get involved on a project that would combine music and mental health.
And the idea just kind of hit me, and it was like, I can just combine one and the other together. And this is how the ensemble formed.
We found we had a shared passion for making music seem relevant in a wider context, not just a sort of pure, this is music for its own sake. We won't tarnish it with associating it with things.
We wanted to do something to spread mental health awareness, or the music itself has helped us with our own mental health issues. The goals of our ensemble are to destigmatize mental health, spread awareness, and then open conversations for people that are either suffering themselves or know somebody who's suffered or want to help those who are suffering from their own illness.
And we're going to be doing this by performing pieces that are written by Marcus Feld about his own mental health sort of journeys, and also composers that have had their own mental health struggles.
My relationship with music at both university, undergraduate, and music college, postgraduate was much more complicated than just a simple, pure enjoyment, which I had as a child, and I feel more now. Because the minute you introduce an element of competition or judgment, immediately in my mind, and I think in many people's, it creates a feeling of inadequacy and trying to strive for a perfection that clouds the music making, and it can be very difficult to separate the two. And indeed, there were times at music college which I thought, why am I doing this? I'm clearly not as good as everybody else there, kind of imposter syndrome. But there was something that kept pulling me through. But there were many moments where I just wanted to cry and give up because I felt the pressure was just too much. And I felt ill because of the pressure as well. During my undergraduate years, I had a form of chronic fatigue, which took about 6 months to a year to resolve itself. Because I think what it was is I was doing too much. There were physical factors as well, but there was an intense pressure I was putting on myself, and I felt it coming back in music college. But I was older and wiser, able to recognise what was happening and take steps to be able to plough through it without getting seriously ill again. I didn't get any formal help as such, although I have to stress the services were available. But what really helped me was just talking about it to my singing teacher, to other people, most of whom were experiencing very similar things. I think just being open about it was what really helped us all through it, I feel, and acknowledging it. And I think I was able to do that again because I was older in a way that when I was 18, 19, 20, I didn't feel as able to do. But at 26, 27, we were all in the same boat. And we were all a bit more grown up, so yeah. My relationship with music right now is much steadier than it was when I finished my master's a year ago. I'm much more able, because I've had the time off during pregnancy, to really enjoy and savour what I was doing and pay attention to the language and the music behind it. It's really lovely to have that time and space before I go back to work more full time later this year. So it's in quite a good place right now.
I've always struggled with my mental health, even as a child. I had a very rough childhood as far as some domestic issues at home. As I got into my teenage years, things were really, really going well for me, but I still had these problems going on. I saw my first therapist for my illness when I was 15. That didn't go over so well. And then following up with that, in 2015, I had my first official diagnosis of bipolar disorder after some very nasty reoccurrences that were going on with my mental illness, my depression, everything. The bipolar disorder itself, I was having more of the severe symptoms of it then. Chose hospitalization, received my diagnosis. Things were going well for a while. Due to financial reasons, I wasn't able to maintain a lot of my treatment plan. So that eventually faded away. And then within the next few years, I graduated college. And then shortly after I graduated, everything came back. And 2017 was probably one of the roughest years of my life. I had at least 10 visits to the ER, probably 4 hospitalizations. At least one was over a week's stay. Some of them were just simply, let's get your medication fixed, or let's, just get you out of crisis. And I did a little bit of time in a crisis home that kind of just takes you out of society for a little while so you can work on your own mental health. From there, it wasn't until I moved to New Jersey that I got a doctor that really pushed for my treatment, and we went and we did a whole different treatment plan, cleaned the board of all the medications that I would need, and just did all new ones. And it's worked so well for me, made me so much more aware of what I had to do for myself. I started documenting my mental health, doing monthly health assessments, just to keep myself in check and be more aware and be mindful to my everyday, my illness, what's going great in my life, what I could improve on. It all becomes one. I've learned that my bipolar disorder isn't a disorder, but it's just a syndrome that I have to live with, and I've just learned to live with it. There's still days where I have symptoms and, I feel sad or, depressed, or sometimes I get the supermania and I can be up for 4 or 5 days without a problem. But I take that in stride. I kind of live with it, or I know I'm getting manic, I should step back and do something about it and refocus my attention or turn that into something beneficial, like my work.
So my mental health journey, I guess, properly began in my teens. I'd lost my mum to cancer when I was 8, and I think that was the first time where going through that stage where you're transitioning to a different stage of your life, I found it very difficult to adjust. But with psychotherapy and antidepressants, I was able to get a lot better and feel a lot better. And when I went to university, I did generally a lot better there. And then this second sort of really difficult time for me was in 2015. It was in November when I was looking at my bank statement and had a panic attack for the first time. And that sort of set off the next period up until now, really, over the last 3-4 years, where I've really struggled with anxiety relating to career, my relationships, my self-esteem, and things like this, which has probably been the most challenging thing to deal with that I've ever had to deal with. I've had CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, which has been very, very useful in managing anxiety. Dynamic interpersonal therapy has also been really useful, and I'm also having long-term psychotherapy with anxiety medication now, and it's up and down, as I think a lot of people watching this will know, but it's a work in progress.
So I think that depends very much what the music I was doing was for. The greatest sheer joy of it came from things that I was asked to do which had no exam or judgment or competition, which is very big for singers. Well, it's big for all instruments at the end of it. For my final recital and competition, I felt an immense amount of pressure, and actually I don't think I could have described myself as very happy, but There were joyful moments like being asked to do lots of early music, which I felt for me much more free. I used to come and sing for the lute classes, to be their singer for their Dowland songs, and we did Monteverdi soprano trios in Great Malvern Priory with lute and theorbo. That was probably my most purely joyful experience of music making, because we were doing it just for the music. And I found in early music a kind of freedom that I didn't necessarily find in the more formal song settings we had to do with voice and piano. I also did a lot of work with a wonderful guitarist who I still work with. She's finishing music college this year. We do concerts together. The guitar and voice repertoire, again, I found that freedom. Lots of stuff by Spanish composers, Benjamin Britten. Again, because I was just doing it for the joy of it. No exam, but we still did really well.
It's hard for me as a composer sometimes to go to a concert and simply enjoy the music, because you kind of sit there and you analyze it a little bit to understand how it is. But every so often there's that one piece that you just kind of sit back and close your eyes and just simply enjoy. And I think that's probably the best thing that music can do for me. I've always been musical. I actually have an uncle who's also a composer, and he introduced me to music when I was young. By the time I graduated high school, I started writing. But it was during my undergrad was when I started really feeling some of the problems with my mental illness. So I started using the music as kind of an outlet for that. I kind of write ideas inspired by how I was feeling, or how I wanted to feel, or just some of the torment that I was going through. And this evolved into some of my pieces. So the music itself has always been an integral part of my life.
Music is important to me for a variety of reasons. Both my parents were professional musicians, and it was through them that I got inspired to do music. I went through a really rough time in my childhood, so music was a way of outletting some of that emotion and a way to escape. I also think it's very important in the world of music today to collaborate and to look for ways to think outside the box and push boundaries of what we're talking about. The project is all about reaching different audiences, different people, hoping to bring them something that they don't know about mental health.
So I've written several pieces that were inspired by my mental health. I think my main one right now is my work Vincent. It's inspired by a series of paintings by Van Gogh. The story behind this piece was, it was shortly after my first hospitalization in 2015. I went to New York to MoMA, and this is fresh out of my hospitalization, so I'm still not quite myself. You know, I was just kind of going through the museum and just enjoying what was around me. But I locked eyes on the Starry Night and just kind of thought about, you know, the same torment that Van Gogh had with his own illness, realizing that I'm not alone in this. I ended up sketching so many sketches, just staring in front of that painting, writing down ideas and what was going on in my head, instrumentation, even chords. Within 3 weeks after that, the first movement of Vincent was done, polished, ready for performance. It took several months later to finish other paintings, and to this day I think it's one of my favorite things I've ever done. Vincent was kind of a very important piece and like a turning point in my life, so I think it was more serious. However, there's other works of music that I've then started learning about who I am through my mental health. I have a violin solo titled Magenta Skies, and it's inspired by Hurricane Sandy and the skies, the bright pink skies that happened after the storm hit, and the storm devastated where I was living. And there was just something so magical about thinking, like all this trauma that was going on, all the devastation, it's now over, and it's time to rebuild. I also wrote a piece titled Duality. I wanted to take the two sides of my own bipolar disorder and think about, the mania and the depression, and yet how they link together. In the middle, it's the same me. It's who I am and who I always will be. But these are two different sides, how I'm feeling this way or how I'm feeling this way. But yet it's the same thing that encompasses it. So yes, it's in two separate movements, but if you really listen to the piece, it's got the same structure underneath with all the craziness on top.
It's very important to me to spread awareness about people's mental health, people's ups and downs, and how to access help as well, because I think many people just assume that people will be derisive and laugh at them and therefore don't get the help they need. But I think on a musical level it's also important because it's a very high stress profession. So even if you couldn't say you had a clinical diagnosis of something or other, I think most musicians, they're creative people, so they're likely to be very empathetic and feel things quite keenly on the whole. And they're put in an industry which is very high pressure, very demanding, and I think that makes life difficult for a lot of people. There's a widespread feelings of inadequacy, and if as an industry we can speak out a bit more about that, that's only a good thing, surely, for the mental health of the industry. Even if some people would rather sort of soldier on because they worry about their career prospects, hopefully we can start to open things up a bit. Maybe this is a small part.